Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Derek and Joe. For Joe Azzalina, I am Derek Gano. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. If you are a new listener or watcher, we appreciate you being here. And don't forget, click that subscribe button while you're on YouTube. It very much helps Joe and I out with where we want to build this channel ultimately. So we appreciate everyone who is watching. Once again, we bring back Mike Azzalina, this time to talk a little NBA. Very multi-dimensional he is, so we appreciate you coming on, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know. Sooner or later, I feel like you guys are just gonna get tired of me, though.
Never.
Never.
Lost my pill.
Absolutely not.
Never.
Well, for those that missed it, we had Mike was on for the NFL draft a month or so ago. We just had him on to talk the MLB PEDs and how they should be treated with the Hall of Fame. And now we have him on to talk some second round NFL NBA playoffs recap and the conference finals preview. We are officially down to 4 teams. Let us start in the West as we did with the first round. The number 4 seed, Los Angeles Clippers, went up against the number 1 seed, Utah Jazz, and the Clippers came out with the victory, winning 4-2. We will then talk about at the end about actually the Phoenix and the Clipper series already started, but the Clippers won 4-2. Joe, let's start off with you. What were some of the keys to the series? And since we'll be talking about the Clippers a little bit later, so we're going to be a little focused more on the teams that lost in this first part. Do we see the Jazz, how they are currently rostered with, Conley, Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Ingles, Bogdanovich? Do we ever see them getting past this gauntlet that is the West, because they were the number 1 seed, but unfortunately fell to the Clippers?
Yeah, Utah. I really thought going into the playoffs were a team to be reckoned with, right? Because they like you just named the guys. Rudy Gobert is an all-star center. Donovan Mitchell is one of the better scorers in the NBA. And past that, the loss of Jordan Clarkson hurt them because he was a good 6-man off the bench and could shoot the basketball well. Quinn Snyder's done a very good job. We touched on that with the show with our friend Leonard a couple weeks ago. Quinn Snyder's done a hell of a job in Utah as a head coach. The thing about the West is when the Warriors are really good, right? They weren't good this year, but when they were really good, you have Dallas, who's going to be good for a couple of years. You got to think if they get another player in there with Doncic and company. You have the Clippers, who of course, are marching on, and you have the Trailblazers. That right there, unless I forgot somebody, that's a pretty heavy West in just those 4 teams.
LeBron James and the Lakers.
And the Lakers, right? Okay, so they're obvious. I didn't think about that at that point. Thank you, Derek and Mike, for the head nod. I will say this. I think the Jazz are probably missing one key ingredient. I'm not going to sit there and tell you what it is because I'm not an NBA guy, and I'm sure Mike could maybe expand on that for me. But I will say that Utah probably will have a hard time getting to a Western Conference final. I will leave it there. Mike, can you help me with that Jazz player maybe they're missing?
Well, I mean, in this series, I think Conley struggling or not being on the floor
Right.
for both of the series really hurt them. He missed 5 games in the series. The other piece that they struggle with a little bit. I mean, Rudy Gobert is a tremendous defender. You'll get arguments about he and Simmons in terms of defensive player of the year, but offensively, he's pretty much like Ben Simmons, non-existent on the offensive side. They'll shoot the lights out. I think I'm looking over here at the series, and they had 5 guys shoot over 40% from 3, which is insane. Including Jordan Clarkson, who had a really good series. But Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, Royce O'Neal, who's a really solid piece that they have. But I think they lose Conley. He's a free agent going into next year. He's 33. I don't know that they'll bring him back. But I think this series, just came down to kind of losing that floor general, that veteran, that they depend on, and also not really getting a ton of offense from Rudy Gobert, which has become the norm. But you need some sort of offense there from that spot.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but ultimately I think it did come down to health for the Jazz, and that's why they couldn't move on. It's tough to say that because Kawhi Leonard was also hurt for the Clippers, but Mitchell was probably playing through some pain still. He had that ankle sprain from April 16th. Conley, obviously, as Mike mentioned, didn't play until game 6. And even Gobert, he had a contusion in the hip area in game 6 there. That was, by the way, the only game that they lost in the playoffs that all three played, but none of them were completely 100% healthy. In the first round, Mitchell didn't play, and then the 2 games against the Clippers early on, Conley didn't play. But what I found interesting was in our talk with Leonard in the first round, I said, well, I think with George and Beverly and Kawhi Leonard, they might be able to bottle them up in terms of threes because the Jazz were one of the best 3-point shooter in regular season history, really. But they made 16.8 threes per game in the first round against the Grizzlies. They actually made 19 in this round, which is even more. Yet they still lost. So Donovan Mitchell is going to be a superstar probably. They better build around him. We mentioned Connolly and Niang are 2 unrestricted free agents. You wonder where they go. Do they bring back Connolly or do they move on with someone younger maybe? But I think they have the core, at least, if anyone wants to jump in there. I don't know, to answer Mike's or Joe's question, what do they need? Man,
I mean, Ingles. I mean, I just looked. Ingles scored.
Maybe a little more scoring, a little more depth there.
Right.
They have the fine starting 5. You got Clarkson, but after that, I mean, Derek Favors is getting a little older. Ilyasova doesn't get time anymore. O'Neal's nice off the bench, but maybe just a little bit more off the bench. I don't know how much more you can build them up. I wonder if I didn't get to see a ton of the series, Mike, but I wonder if did they kind of I know the Clippers like to go small. Did that affect the Rudy Gobert lineup, to having the big center in there? It wasn't a big deal the first round because they had Valanciunas playing most of the minutes, but I know the Clippers like to go small. Did that bother the Jazz defense at all? Did we notice?
I'm sure it did. When you look at that roster, aside from Gobert and Mitchell and even Connolly when he was healthy in Game 6 or trying to be healthy in Game 6,
yeah,
they're not a great defensive team, especially a transition defensive team. Bogdanovich is not known for his defense, nor is Ingles.
No.
Yeah. Jordan Clarkson, while a tremendous offensive player, always struggled defensively. He's not really ever been the type of guy. That's why he's a 6th man. He's not a star. He doesn't really pose too much of a threat defensively. I think that was probably what it was. I mean, even without Kawhi, that Clippers team will kill you in transition. They like to run, and they'll hit their transition threes, especially when they go small. So it does sort of neutralize Gobert in that sense. But you asked a great question. What do they need? And I think depth is probably the right answer. I think every team could use more depth. I mean, we've seen that all across the board. But as I look at their lineup, I think if they lose Conley, they're absolutely going to need guard play to pair with Mitchell.
Yeah.
there's no doubt about that. They're going to need guard play to pair with Mitchell. I think either way, they're going to need another guard. They have a ton of scoring forwards, but Jordan Clarkson will probably continue to be the sixth man, and they're going to need another guard or two to sort of balance out what they have in terms of bigs.
And do they have enough to get a guard? Like, do they have enough to get Lillard, for example? Like, do they have enough to get somebody like that?
They're not the type of team that's going to go get him. They're not. Look, I know they were the one seed. This was a weird year in the NBA, all across the board. Weird year. When you ask the question of do they have enough to get out of the West, I think with the powerhouses that are up top in the West, I don't see them getting out of the West. Like, I never saw them getting out of the West, even when they were the one seed this year. They weren't the team that concerned me coming out of the West. And, Phoenix is only going to get better. I know we're going to talk about them, but that's a team that was kind of, not talked about at the beginning of all of this. That there's a lot of teams out West that are, that are really talented and really good. And this team might take a step back without Conley next year. They really might.
So let's go ahead and jump over to the Phoenix Suns. They were the number 2 seed, and they faced off against the number 3 seed Denver Nuggets, who took down the Trailblazers. Wasn't much of they were good games, but 4-0 sweep for the Suns. Mike, is it as easy as maybe Denver got away with it because their front court defense is putrid with Cantor and Nurkic, or Nurkic, excuse me. But they didn't have much guard play. Obviously, Murray got done for the year halfway through the regular season, and so they ended up finishing up with oh boy, I don't have his name in front of me. Campazzo, I think was his name, something like that. Campazzo, okay. And Austin Rivers. So was it as simple as that? They just kind of didn't have the talent left to beat the Suns?
Yeah, I mean, those are big blows, man. Like Jamal Murray's a player. And that's a big blow to a team when you lose somebody like that. And let's just be really fair. Like, the Suns they're really good. Like, yeah. They're really good. They've got a ton of scoring, and with the play that they're getting from Ayton right now, like, they're dangerous. They're and they didn't even Chris Paul the other night. So, I mean, when it came down to it, yeah, I think some of it was Jamal Murray, not having him on the floor. And, Austin Rivers is fine. I don't think they got enough out of Michael Porter at all in the series. I think they needed a lot more out of Michael Porter. And I think he'll get there. He's still really young. And you can tell that the talent is there. But I don't know that the stage was set for him quite yet. And I think once it is, they're going to be, because Jokic is a phenomenal player. He's phenomenal, and his durability for his size is commendable as well. They're in a good place in terms of their roster as well. When you think about what they have coming back to them, they will have to figure out a way to keep Millsap if they want to keep him. Austin Rivers is an unrestricted free agent. I don't know if they'll bring him back for depth. But outside of that, they're not losing a whole lot. And Joe, I think like that's a big deal for a team as talented as they are, to be able to bring back those young pieces. But what'd you say?
Well, you said it about Jokic, right? He's the real deal. I mean, in game 1, he already had 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 blocks. So he's a stat filler. And a lot of people thought he could definitely win the MVP this year, which probably was deservedly so to him, as he did win the MVP. So yes. There I go, not knowing what I'm talking about. But no, then he had a double in game 2, 24 and 13. He just continues to score a lot. You're right, though. They didn't have the cast with him. Porter had 15 and 5 the one game. He had 11 and 6. I mean, that's okay, but to be a second guy, I mean, Aaron Gordon had 18 and 4 rebounds. I mean, it was okay again. They just didn't have the arsenal to come out and say, we're at least taking game 2 from you to make it a 1-1 series. I always think that's huge in these series. We'll get into that later with Philly and Atlanta. I just believe that when you get off to a 2-0 start, man, your backs are already against the wall. Man, you're fighting out of the corner like a boxer. Like, and we'll never cover boxing on the show, by the way. But just saying that. And so
unless it's Rocky.
Right. It has
We
been
did talk some Rocky
That's
before.
True.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, and we'll talk about the Suns. And as our viewers will know, and you both know, I picked the Suns to win the whole thing. So right now I'm happy. Like I'm sitting there like, just really just maybe I do know a little bit. But anyway, the Nuggets are a team in the rise. And it's Jokic is fun to watch. I did watch him some this year, and he's fun.
You did mention there that the Jamal Murray piece, and not having. I mean, that's 22 points off of your out of your lineup every night. I mean, that's a lot. Like that. You're talking about a fifth of your scoring on most nights out of your lineup. And yeah, Aaron Gordon's a fine player. Campazzo, though, he's not making up that offense. Like he's just not. He runs an offense really well. He can shoot it a little bit, but he's not going to get you 22 a night. He's just not that type of player. Austin Rivers can go off, but he's not that type of player. So it's that's a big loss. Do they win the series with him? I don't think so. Is it more competitive than 4-0? Probably. They probably steal a game or two.
4-2. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned Michael Porter Jr. He had 18 points per game in the Portland series. Regular season, he had 19 a game, down to 15.3 in this series. So they didn't quite get what they were looking for out of him. You could kind of see his ball handling abilities are not quite there. So I will say there's not much cap room, they say, for the Nuggets, unless now JaMychal Green, who didn't get much of, he got about 17 minutes per game in these games, and Will Barton has they both have player options. Will Barton is due $14.6 million. So if they both decline, then that could open up some money. Otherwise, there's not a ton to go around. But they should have their mid-level exception available, to which I thought of some names. I would like to see them get someone like an experienced backcourt guy. I thought of maybe someone you can get with mid-level money. So maybe a Derrick Rose or a Patty Mills for the Spurs. Just someone to give you some veteran presence in the backcourt, which is probably part of the reason why they struggled in these playoffs. And the reason why I agree with Mike, I don't know if they would have gone past, even had they had Murray gotten past, but some guys like those names. What do you think, Mike?
Guys, I one of the stats that I love to live by when I look at a game in isolation or a series in isolation is the plus minus stat for point differential when the player's on the court versus off the court. Guys, ready for this? Jokic, he was a minus 12.3 on average. I'm pretty sure this is averaged out by what I'm looking at here. Minus 12.3. Porter Jr. minus 10.8. Monty Morris, minus 17.3. Campazzo, minus 9. Aaron Gordon, minus 9.5. They don't have a single guy in the positive until you get to JaVale McGee. Like, players that didn't really matter in the series. Yeah. Like, that can happen when you look above. Chris Paul was a plus 12. Mikal Bridges was a plus 18. DeAndre Ayton was a plus 15.5. Like, that's the difference right there. Like, that's the difference. You got to have guys that are making an impact when they're on the floor. And these guys certainly weren't.
Because truly the Suns, they have a ton of depth that they throw guys out there that you're like, we're not losing too much sending those guys out there. Whereas the Nuggets, they're playing with only 3 starters to begin with, because Campazzo and Rivers probably aren't even starters anyways. So, Will the Nuggets get back there with Murray? That's tough. Can he come back fully healthy? That will ultimately see. But I think they do need to have a backup plan and get someone there who can score and a veteran presence, I think, would be very good for that backcourt. Well, let's move on here to, oh boy, moving on to the East. And we had the number 1 seed Philadelphia 76ers going up against the number 5 seed Atlanta Hawks. It just completed last night. We're taping this on Monday. So the Atlanta Hawks won the series 4-3. By the way, Atlanta, don't slouch at them because they are on fire. I'll throw out the stats. You saw plenty of times they started off the season 14-20. Since Nate McMillan took over, they finished the regular season 27-11, and they're now 8-4 in the playoffs. But we'll talk about Atlanta later. Let's attack the Sixers, and we might as well start off with you, Mike. Well, what were your immediate thoughts in that series, and what do we think happened?
They choked. I mean, I look. I don't love taking away credit from the Hawks. Like I hate to do that. They played hard and they fought with every fiber that they possibly could have. But I find it hard to believe that anybody who watched that series would think anything other than the Sixers just choked. I mean, 2 back-to-back games with 20-point leads, a game 7 in your house, guys. Over the last 2 seasons, let's take out the being in Florida for that time and basically playing in front of empty, when they were in the dome or whatever they were calling it, I can't remember, the bubble, when they were playing in the bubble. Yeah. Take away the bubble games. Over the last 2 years, the Sixers are 61-9 at Wells Fargo. They lost 3 games in this series at Wells Fargo. So if you were to tell me that, before this series, I would have laughed in your face and told you to go take a walk, because there was no way the Sixers were going to lose 3 games at home to a team that I found to be inferior. But I want to just say this for a second. I took away Embiid and I took away Trae Young just for my own purposes. And I look at the teams, and honestly, I do think that overall the Hawks might actually have a better roster when it comes down to it. Maybe not as deep, but I only think that the Sixers look deep because Doc Rivers uses everybody, which was a big part of this series and why it went wrong for the Sixers. He refused to adjust to his all bench lineup. Ben Simmons was a complete disaster in this series. Guys, they played 7 fourth quarters. Ben Simmons took 3 shots combined in all of those fourth quarters.
Can't happen. Can't happen.
He made Sixers offense was big. He did. He was 3 for 3, 100 field goal percentage, guys. But here's the thing: they were playing 4-on-5 when he was on the court. He was dribbling past half court, basically handing it off to somebody, and then he would go stand in the dunker spot or set some weak screen. It basically became Ben was last night, because he couldn't do anything else, was just taking the ball on dead balls from people in the Suns trying to get him worked up. That was the only thing he added to the Sixers lineup at any point. So Derek, when you asked the question, what went wrong? There are a million things that went wrong. They choked as a team. Doc Rivers didn't coach them out of that. And a guy they were paying $180 million wasn't on the floor for 5 of the most important possessions of the season. So there's a lot there. We don't have time to unpack it all, but there's a lot there that went wrong. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I always tell Mike, Derek, that I don't enjoy watching the NBA. I never really have. But this team, with the addition of Seth Curry and Danny Green, I was intrigued to watch them this year. And I did watch some regular season games. When I got to watch them in the playoffs, this just looked like a different team to me. Not the whole playoffs, because this series seemed to me that I alluded to it earlier. The second game, if they won that second game, we could have been looking at a whole different series. Now, I know you can say that a lot about us, a lot of things, but to watch a talented player in this day and age to not look like he wants to be out there, or like Mike just said, he dribbled the ball over half court and he shoveled the ball to Tobias Harris 5 times in a row I saw last night. And I didn't just watch Game 7. I watched 5 and 6 a lot too. I did watch a bunch of the series. Let me tell you something. Jim O'Brien, an assistant coach on the 76ers a bunch of years ago, we're going back to 17, 18 now. I heard on a radio show today that he told Ben Simmons in 2018, you have 3 things I want you to work on. Number 1, free throw shooting. Number 2, overall shooting, even if it's just jump shots. Number 3, finish the basketball. Make sure you finish. Last night, he had a baseline empty to dunk the ball over Trey.
God.
I mean, come on. Like, you got to be kidding me. And again, I'm not sitting there saying the guy's not talented. I watched him live. Michael has now seen him live. I watched him in a game 2 years ago against the Pelicans. And I was impressed with the way the guy glided down the court like a gazelle. Like, he's a very, very athletic player. But he just lost the city of Philadelphia last night. And shame on him for making comments like, it's just me. Grow up, Ben, because you know what? Go somewhere else. And I hope they do trade him. Not even being a Sixers diehard, but just being a fan of basketball. Like, grow up. Like, come on. And you got Joel Embiid who's sitting there saying he's sorry. The guy just tore his, I want to say it was MCL, right? He tore meniscus. I'm on my soapbox. I didn't think I'd get like this, but I'm on fire right now. Like, he tore that, and he's going out in the papers today and apologizing to the city. It shows you two depths of 2 human beings that actually care and one that doesn't. Like, come on, guys. Like, and I'll say this to finish it. Philadelphia lost the series. Yes, Atlanta did good things, and we'll talk about them later. Philadelphia absolutely choked. Like, it was as bad as Mitch Williams giving up the home run to Joe Carter. My only Phillies reference there.
They seem to lack that killer instinct in this series. They didn't even really have it too much in the first series, honestly. But man, you kind of, they were, even if they won, they wouldn't even have to worry about Game 7. Had they won games 4 and 5, they were up like 15 to 20 points at halftime in both games. I think it was a little bit more the 5th game, but they just couldn't put teams away. And part of the reason, as we just have been mentioning, Ben Simmons, he missed 48 free throws in 12 playoff games this year. He made 25 and missed, out of 73 attempts, that is 34%.
Worse than
Now
Shaq.
it was worse than Shaq. Yes, I believe so. I believe he was at least in the 40%. We talked about how he only Game 1, he was 2 for 2 from the field in the 4th quarter, and Game 3 was 1 for 1. Didn't take a shot in the rest of the series.
Doc Rivers needs to have a little blame too, and maybe more than a little. How are you not, like we talked about Mike early in the series? I think it was like he wanted to not have Simmons on Young at first. That was one thing they tried, and I'm thinking to myself, don't you always have your best defensive player on?
But wouldn't you say he was almost forced into it because of Danny Green getting hurt? I feel like, I don't know if had he
Maxey stepped up
had
too,
make
though.
that move
Maxey
right
stepped
away.
up.
Here's what happened. I mean, after Game 1, Ben basically went to Doc and said, I want to guard Matisse, because Danny Green was, because Danny Green was still playing in Game 2. He was not injured at that point. But the reason that Doc did not want him to guard Trae Young is because of foul trouble. And guys, I was going to wait on this, but Joseph, you talked about, basketball and loving basketball. Trae Young is everything that's wrong with basketball right now, at least in the NBA. And that's the reason they didn't want Ben to guard him, because of the foul trouble, because of Trae and his ability to make contact or initiate contact. Like, the way that the announcers spin how Trae Young plays the game is amazing to me. But that's why initially. But when you watch Ben play, and I will compliment this, when you watched him defend Trae Young, he's very smart in the way that he if he knows Trae's looking to make contact with him, he'll kind of slide step it or step back from it, and he won't let it happen. so he played smart in that regard, but that was the reason he didn't start the series on him and then continued to guard him as time went on. When he got in foul trouble, they pulled him off of Trae Young and they would bring Thibault in to guard him, or George Hill would guard him. Tobias Harris had a couple of possessions where he was able to keep him in front. But I mean, there are plenty of things to criticize Doc Rivers for. I don't know that was one, because he did make the adjustment quickly as soon as Ben.
That's fair. Now, guys, do you think? I think my only question right now is Simmons a Sixer next year? And what do his teammates think of him right now? I mean, to be honest, great defensive player, by the way. I will say that. I will give him that. He's a great defensive player.
Yeah.
Derek, why don't you go ahead and take that first? I'll jump.
I was going to
take that
say,
away from him.
does the fact that Matisse Thybulle has really come into his own as a great defender this year, does that make Ben Simmons more expendable? Because if he doesn't find his offensive, I literally just an article just came out about Doc Rivers saying that they have a plan. They have a plan with Ben Simmons. They're going to work with him to get his shot right. Well, how many times have we heard this same song and dance? So I don't know. But my thoughts are,
you can't trade Maxey. I want to trade Maxey.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to trade Simmons at this point, you're not getting much for him unless there's someone out there who truly loves him. The thing is, if you want to trade for, the biggest names out there, if you want to trade for a Damian Lillard, you're going to have to trade probably Simmons, probably Maxey, probably like 2 first-round picks in order to get a Damian Lillard. What I saw in that series was not good. He did not want anything to do that specific moment that you pointed out, God. Joe, where he is literally right here to the basket, and he is 6'11". Trae Young is whatever, 6'1", 2,
5'10",
and 6'2" on the roster.
Good day.
Maybe not actually 6'2". And he dips it off to, I think it was Tobias Harris. I'm like, what are you doing, Thibault? What are you doing? He's literally looking to pass the ball every time first. He is not looking for a shot. And the one shot I noticed he took, the right-handed hook shot. I'm like, what? Not even on your dominant hand do you want to take it? So
I wouldn't text Michael last night just because I knew it was such a frustrating game for, of course, Sixers diehards. I will say this, though. You got to wonder. Joel Embiid came out today, and I don't know if you guys heard it. He said that he was asked about that play, and he then not that play, that sequence, because then Thibault went to the line and said that was a big point, though, because Thibault missed the one free throw. Not, again, guys, we know this, like, as basketball fans, like, and playing the game even. Just because at one point in the game, you're not losing the game there. I do think Horder, we didn't talk about Horder yet. He had a heck of a game. We'll talk about him later, I guess. But man, did he have a heck of a game? And Gallinelli, and I didn't say that name right, but he had a heck of a game. So,
if I could, I know you guys wanted to probably jump to the net, but if I could just tag on to a couple of things. I obviously follow the Sixers very closely, so there's a couple of things that I just want to throw out there. The first being Doc Rivers' comments today. His comments last night were not as glowing. When asked, can Ben Simmons be a point guard of a championship team, he basically said, I don't know.
He did.
I don't know right now. And then today to come out and say, we got to do something. Look, they're going to try and build Ben up as much as they can in the offseason. There's still value to Ben Simmons. Like, look, I understand he shrivels in the big moments, but the guy over his career still averages like 14, 8, and 8. Like, there are 2 guys in the history of basketball.
But he's probably at his lowest trade value at this point is what 100%, the point
because
is.
What just happened in the spotlight of the season. Yeah.
Is it mental though, guys? Is it mental, Mike? Like, is this a mental thing? Okay.
Yes, that's an entirely different conversation, though.
It's at LSU.
You could do an entire show on Ben Simmons if you wanted to.
I don't know if you could.
But you absolutely could. But the end of the day, guys, like the Sixers, when you think about every other team that's in the playoffs, was in the playoffs, left in the playoffs, they all have something in common. Like, they all have the dude who can take the big shots, isn't afraid to take the big shots, wants the ball in their hands in the big shots. that can create on their own, right? So Trae Young can create on his own. Doesn't need somebody to create for him. Booker doesn't need somebody to create for him. Can make the big shots, right? Like we talked about some of the teams that have already lost in the playoffs. Kevin Durant was a toe from creating his own shot to win the game and be in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Sixers don't have that. Like Tobias Harris can't create his own shot. Like Joel Embiid, he will try his absolute best to create his own shot, but sometimes forgets that he's 7'1" and 260 pounds. And there are dudes that are flying all around him because his point guard won't get out of the post. So the Sixers need a guy that can create his own shot and is not afraid to take the shots in those moments. A Bradley Beal, a LaVine,
Curry,
like these types of guys.
brothers.
But LaVine, Beal, we mentioned Dean, like these are the guys that they need to be looking at if they really want to take advantage of Joel Embiid's prime, because he has maybe 3 years left in this window that he's going to be the type of player that he is right now.
Yeah.
And he's not going to win with Ben because they don't have the player to make this stuff happen. So I don't think he's a Sixer for all of next year. What I mean by that is I don't know if he's getting traded this offseason, but he's not going to finish the season with the Sixers next year. Morey did not draft him. He tried to trade him this year. He's not going to be a Sixer.
They have to trade him before the season starts, I think. I don't think you can go into the season with him.
They're not going to accept nothing for him, I'll tell you that.
Well, I get that. No, that's true. That's true.
Well,
good debate.
2 years left on Embiid's contract. He is 27 right now. And he'll probably get the Supermax, so that'll bring him to 6 years. So we'll go through 33. But yeah, like you said, maybe about 3 years left of his prime.
If we're lucky, we get
so.
Yeah,
I want him to get a ring too. I do. I want Joel to get Embiid to get a ring.
Well, now that we took about a little over on that one, but that's fine. I figured we would. So let's move on to the second Eastern Conference game here, which may have turned out to be a little bit of a surprise. Maybe not when you look at all the injuries that occurred, but the number 2 seeded Brooklyn Nets took on the number 3 seed Milwaukee Bucks, and Milwaukee came away with the victory, or with the series 4-3, winning Game 7. That is the first Game 7 road win in Milwaukee franchise history. And Joe, let's start off with you. Can we finally put to bed the Giannis is not a number 1 talks, or do we ultimately think it was whether or not he wins? Because he put up some great numbers at least, right?
Well, I think it's always hard because, these guys do it in big moments, but the biggest moment is now to beat a team in Atlanta who ran through the number 1 seed, even in Game 7, they still won some big games. And now you're thinking, okay, like, I know Middleton is going to be tasked probably with guarding him, or Holiday will probably be on Young. If there's one thing that I noticed about Atlanta is he seriously will shoot the ball from half court. Like he did it from the logo the other night. And I think you got to be, the reason I brought that up is you got to be aware of that when you're Milwaukee. It kills a run. It could spur you on a run. Like it's just the way basketball goes. And Trae Young does it better than anybody right now. Giannis is an absolute monster. And if he scores 30 points in a game, it's probably a good thing for Milwaukee. Brook Lopez has become better. Former Stanford Cardinal. I used to watch him in college. And he scored 19 and had 5 in a game. Middleton scoring double digits. He had 35 and 15. That's amazing. And that's not even Giannis. If Giannis does get you 20 even that game, that's huge. I just think, Derek, that the Milwaukee Bucks are better than what people think. I did fold, and as I texted you earlier, I thought the Nets would be there. I bought in the hype, I guess, but I took the Nets, so I can't say I have both finals teams. At one point, I did say Milwaukee would get there. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting thing for Giannis. If he wins the championship, he'll go down as probably one of the best big men to ever play. if he doesn't get there, people are going to wonder why. So, but he can do a lot, man. He's a heck of a player.
Sorry, I did lead you down the wrong path there, Joe. We're supposed to be talking about the Nets, Mike, let's jump to you here. I wrote down unfortunate with all the injuries for the Nets. Is it fair to say that the better team may have lost this series? You can say it with maybe with the Sixers, but I mean, is it definitely fair to say that the better team lost here due to injury?
It's interesting when you sent that question over, I looked, I was trying to think like, man, yeah, obviously they have the three best individual players in this. Well, three of the top five best individual players in the series. And I'd argue probably the three best players in the series when they're all healthy. Like I get Giannis's presence and what he brings, but when you think about pure scorers and what those three guys bring to a game every night, I take Durant, Irving, or Harden in those moments. But I don't know. I think in terms of individual players all put together, yeah. But when I think about the Bucks, that's not a bad team that they're running out there. Like, obviously Giannis and Middleton, they're premier players and scorers. Drew Holiday's been in the league a long time, a very underrated point guard who does a lot of things really well. He's not great at any one thing. I think he's a pretty solid defender. He shoots it okay. Brook Lopez, Joseph already pointed out, he's improved his game immensely. Like he's become a true stretch five to the point where you need to be out there to guard him. You can't give him space. He will pull it and he will make it. Like he shot 40% from three, which was the highest of anybody on the Milwaukee team in this series. Like that's incredible when you think about it. Bryn Forbes had a great series. Pat Connaughton's a good player. Can shoot it as well. So, I mean, yeah, I guess when you look at it just based on paper and you see those three names at the top, you're like, yeah, the better team won. But when you think about team and what that actually means, I don't know. I mean, I think the better players lost. Like the NBA is missing out because those three guys aren't playing in the next series. And injuries kind of won the day, which everybody was worried about when they put this super team together. Would they hold up? And they didn't. They didn't.
Yeah.
It's just, it is what it is.
The number is 12. That is the number of games that the big three played together. Now, Harden was acquired 13 games into the season. So of 71 total games, they played 12 together. And that's a very tough number to win ultimately.
And they moved a lot of depth, Derek, to get some of the guys got. Like, and here's the thing: Spencer Dinwiddie is a free agent next year. Jeff Green is a free agent next year. Blake Griffin is a free agent next year. Who made good contributions to that team when he came over. Now, that doesn't mean none of them will be back, but like outside of those top big three, like if something should happen, like it did this year, the Nets are going to suffer a little bit in terms of depth. Like that's just the nature of the beast. When you bring those like three guys like that onto one roster, you do suffer in other places, unless you're the Golden State Warriors and you have a genius running your organization apparently, and you can put pieces like Iguodala around it, guys like that can, kind of supplement. But I don't know. The Nets, I don't think they're as clear cut as everybody thinks they are to run the East for the next few years, especially with the age of some of these guys and their injury history.
I will say, believe it or not, numero uno that they need to do, re-sign Bruce Brown, because he truly,
well, he's restricted.
So match that number, whatever you have to do, match that number that anyone puts out for them, which might be a pretty big number, but I don't care. Do it, because the defensive intensity that he put out there, the motor, he attacks the rim. He's truly a glue guy, a young glue guy. I mean, you got the older veteran glue guys like the Jeff Greens that would be nice to bring back, but I truly think they need to bring back Bruce Brown. I wonder, ever since, yes, they had to get rid of some depth pieces, like you said, ever since they lost Jared Allen, I thought that they kind of lacked, and obviously with Blake Griffin getting the majority of the minutes. By the way, the minutes that the starters played in game 7 were ridiculous. The bench played absolutely nothing for either team pretty much. But I think they could use that mid-level exception on some sort of defensive stopper. I thought would be good for them. Maybe I thought of like a Nerlens Noel, steal him from New York, bring him over here. Or people might not know this name, a Mo Harkless, who is a very good wing defender, maybe to bring in. I think they need some defensive guys to bring in, and hopefully, hey, you never know. It's going to be tough when all healthy. They're probably one of the best teams in the league, but and we saw it, without even missing one of them, they severely struggled. Even with Kevin Durant putting up 35 points a game in this series, he couldn't quite put them over. Although, as Mike mentioned, he was one toe away from sending them to the conference finals. But
I will say that if the Sixers wanted to take a run at Spencer Dinwiddie in free agency, that would not hurt my feelings.
He already declined his option, I believe, or so he's a free agent now, so unrestricted.
Yep.
So, guys, I heard today too that the Sixers could take a look at CJ McCollum.
I'm sure they'll take a look at everybody.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Steph Curry.
Right.
So that'll move us into the conference finals preview, our second segment here, and that brings us down to our final 4 teams, which, by the way, when you look at the last championship for each of these teams, the Phoenix Suns, oh, that was never. The LA Clippers, oh, that was never. They've never won. The Atlanta Hawks, they won way back in 1958 when they were the St. Louis Hawks.
Wow.
And Bob Pettit was the leading scorer. For those young kids watching the show, go out there and watch some Bob Pettit videos. He was a very good player back in the 1950s. And then the most recent championship was 1971 when the Bucks won under Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So we definitely have some new teams trying to win a title this year. Let's start off, guys, in the West. The number 2 seed Phoenix Suns, the number 4 seed LA Clippers. The Clippers did win the regular season series 2-1. First game was last night, Sunday. Phoenix took it. No Chris Paul for the Phoenix Suns. No Kawhi Leonard for the Clippers. Kawhi has his sprained right knee. You wonder if and then I know Chris Paul has had some negative tests recently, so he may be back before Leonard actually. So, Joe, they were your Phoenix Suns, so let's jump to you first. Whatever you want to talk about here, give us some key matchups for the series, some X factors for the series, and what each team needs in order to win. Whatever you want to throw out there, throw out there.
Well, I think I'd be crazy not to say that Devin Booker needs to have a big series. The guy is a heck of a shooter. He shoots threes like nobody. I would like to say that it would be really cool to see a Devin Booker Trae Young final, as much as I don't really want to see Atlanta there. Just the shooting would be a pretty interesting game. Chris Paul needs to be healthy. I don't know if the Suns, Derek, that's one of the reasons I said that I like them to go to the finals is because of him, his leadership, the way he gets to the basket, he can shoot, he does it all. And he's been a guy in the NBA that's done it on many teams, but it's never won. I don't think he's ever won a championship, I'm going to say. I don't think I think it's eluded him, right? Okay.
He's never made the finals, in fact.
No, he's never
made the finals. Sorry. So there you go. I think Kawhi Leonard, if he's healthy, could be interesting because he's going to face Booker probably, right? That would be the matchup. They'd want him to stick on Booker. His height, he's about 6'9". Booker is probably 6'6", I would say. It'd be interesting to see that matchup as Booker would try to shoot over him. Ayton will be interesting too to see how he can do underneath. But the Suns just really need to play well as a team, led by Devin Booker, led by hopefully a healthy Chris Paul. A good thing the Suns have the first win. And yeah, I just think if George and Leonard play well, though, I can see the Clippers giving them trouble. My prediction is this series goes 7. I think the Clippers even it up, and I think this series will go 7, and Phoenix will win, and I have a chance at my glory maybe a little bit.
You're not winning any money, Joe. You're not getting any glory. It's just a pat on the back. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know that it goes 7. I don't know that it goes 6. To be honest with you, it's going to depend on Kawhi Leonard's availability. You know, I just don't see the Clippers having much luck with a well-balanced team like the Suns are. They have a little bit of everything. They can shoot, they can score in transition, they score in the paint. Booker doesn't. He's not a one-trick pony at all. He'll get to the basket. He's got mid-range. He can shoot from long range. Yesterday was the first triple-double of his career, believe it or not. When you think about Devin Booker, you would think he would have one at this point. I think it's like 270 career games or something like that. That it took him to get. But what a great job by a great time to have your first triple-double. and while you're at it, not just have a triple-double, not just score 40. But also throw in 11 assists while you're at it.
Not bad.
That's incredible. That's just incredible what he did yesterday, and that's without arguably their leader, his mentor, the guy that came and changed the entire culture. I remember they played the Sixers earlier this year on national TV, and the announcer spent a lot of time talking about Chris Paul and just how bringing him to Phoenix changed the entire culture of what was happening there. It really showed it, the organization, the fans, the players that were already there, that we're ready to do this. We believe in what we have. But I think, if they're going to win, two guys who had a great first game aside from Booker are going to have to continue to do so. And that's DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges, who, gosh, Colangelo.
There it is.
Traded him away.
Villanova guy too.
But yeah, he's a Nova kid. I'm pulling for the Suns. I love Bridges. I love DeAndre Ayton, and I love Devin Booker and Chris Paul. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess if Kawhi's back, it becomes a little bit more of a series. But if he's back, I wonder if he's back because he has to be versus he's able to be. And if it's because he has to be, I don't think it matters. For the Clippers to have a chance, Paul George is going to have to go just absolutely crazy, and Terrence Mann's going to have to do what he did in the last game of the prior series where he just went completely off. I don't remember if he had 34 or 39, but he was
39.
That night.
I just saw it. 39.
So they're going to need scoring from someone other than Paul George. Reggie Jackson gave him a good game the other day, but no one else. I think DeMarcus Cousins got out of single digits, but outside of that, no one else did. I don't see it. I 5, maybe 6 games. I think the Suns kind of roll.
Yeah. Well, I had the Clippers in the beginning of the playoffs, which, man, I can't say it because you're absolutely right. I think if Leonard comes back, it's going to be because they're down 0-2 and they need to win some games in Los Angeles before they go back. Now, by the way, the Clippers had a 7-game series against the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. They just had a 6-game series, but it was pretty much a 7-game series. It was a very tough battle with the Jazz. Different philosophies here is the thing. And I mentioned earlier about the Clippers have been trying to play small ball lately with just having Marcus Morris and Nicholas Batum are the biggest guys out there. I don't think they're going to be – you can't be doing that in this series, not with DeAndre Ayton because he can really move. And you saw him, DeMarcus Cousins made his blew off the dust off of his seat on the bench and – got some minutes in the first game, so I don't think Serge Ibaka is really good. He was a main part of the regular season, but he had an injury. I don't think he's going to be back. But DeAndre Ayton's offensive rebounding ability is going to be very key because if they have that small ball approach, he's going to get those second chance points, and that's not going to be good for the Clippers. The thing is for the Clippers, they're going to be going up against much better wing defenders than they've had in the first two rounds. The Mavs, I mean, Doncic is an okay defender, but and Hardaway is not a good wing defender. Whereas, and then even the wing defenders for the Jazz, okay, you have Mitchell, but then you had Ingles, you had Bogdanovich, not really defenders, as Mike mentioned earlier. This time around, guess what? You're going up against the Bridgeses of the world, and the Jay Crowders of the world, who are very tough wing defenders. And I think Paul George, and if Kawhi Leonard gets in there, I think they're going to struggle. And by the way, I don't think it's too much of a, even if Kawhi Leonard was healthy, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say Devin Booker is the best player on the court. So I don't see it. I'm sorry, Clippers fans, and if there are any that listen to this podcast,
Comment.
but
Tell Derek he's crazy.
yeah, let me know. I don't see it. If there is a chance, they are a very good switching team. The Clippers are. They switch in 43% of pick and roll plays, which the Suns love to do, especially with Paul on the floor. So when he comes back, so that is a positive, I guess. Maybe they have a little bit more depth, stronger depth than the Suns, but I can't give it to the Clippers. I gotta go
really
Suns.
They're really well coached.
Yes,
They're really well coached defensively. Sorry, Derek. I apologize for interrupting. They're very well coached defensively. But it doesn't hurt that they have two of the best defenders in the league on their team, and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Those two guys are really good wing defenders. But they're well coached defensively too, and that's been very apparent. I think for the Suns, if they're going to get scoring like they did in the first game from their role players like Bridges and Crowder, even Cameron Payne and Cameron Johnson were in double digits. If they're going to get that kind of scoring, that's probably the ceiling for those role players. I don't know that you get much more, but if their floor is a floor, like if they're not hitting shots, they're not hitting, like they're not going to score. And that could be where they lose this series. But if they're getting points and Booker's able to create, I think, I don't think it's gonna be much of a series. Booker and Paul, when he comes back, if he's able to come back, which we know he's so good at. He's so good at creating. He's such a pain. He gets in the lane, he can pull up for that mid-range jump shot, and if you come out on him, he's going to dump it down to guys like Sharge when he's on the floor. And guys like Ayton. So I just, I don't see it. I don't see them losing the series. I think they'll be in the finals, and I think they'll win it. I agree with you, Joseph.
So I don't know if we went around officially, but Joe, how many games? I think we all have the Suns moving on, but how many games do you have, Joe?
I said 7. I said Suns in 7.
Mike?
Yep. 5.
And I'm right in the middle. I have 6 written down. So, and I don't think it'll be a sweep. I wouldn't be shocked if it were a sweep, honestly, especially if Kawhi Leonard doesn't come back. But, so that'll move us on then to the Eastern Conference Finals, where we have the number 3 seed Milwaukee Bucks and the number 5 seed Atlanta Hawks. That first game is actually going to be on Wednesday. The Bucks won the regular season series 2-1. How did they get here? The Hawks defeated the Knicks 4-1 in the first round, and the Sixers 4-3 in the second round. And then the Bucks swept the Heat 4-0 in the first round, and the Nets 4-3 in the second round. Mike, let's start with you this time. Some key matchups, X factors. How does each team win in this series?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they do in terms of Trae Young. They were the number 1 defensive team in the league this year, so it'll be really it'll be a testament. It'll be a true test for them to see how they slow him down. I think they'll probably go Drew Holiday, but they have other options. Like they could go with Middleton too. So you could really, you have your choice. I'm sorry, they were not all first team defend. Drew Holiday was. The other two are not, but they're good defenders, and they can use them just like the Sixers used a plethora of guys to slow them down. He does love to go up tempo. He loves to try and get you to be overly aggressive. He does love to initiate contact. I think some of it's going to come down to how much the referees allow in this series. The last few games in the Sixers series, there were noticeably less whistles when he tried to make contact with defenders, which I appreciated quite a bit because it was ridiculous at the start of the
He was
series.
getting angry too last night.
Yeah, well, and he would get angry because he's used to getting those calls.
Yeah,
but
true.
I think they'll go with Holiday. I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't put their first team all defensive player on him. That's the biggest key to this series. But as we saw last night when Trae Young was struggling mightily, Kevin Huerter can create. He can play. He did it in game 2. He scored quite a bit. And he scored last night when it mattered most. The clutch gene is most definitely there for him for sure. I on the other side of things, when it comes down to it, Atlanta's biggest weakness is defending the perimeter. They are not a good perimeter defensive team. We saw it. Seth Curry had an absolute monster series. Shot the lights out and wasn't shy. He was not gun shy. And some of those threes were way too open for a guy who was shooting as well as he was shooting. So it's going to be interesting to see how they defend the perimeter because the Bucks don't just have one shooter. They have multiple shooters. Brook Lopez can shoot it. We talked about that. Pat Connaughton can shoot it. Chris Middleton can shoot it. And so can the aforementioned Drew Holiday. He can shoot it as well. So there are a bunch of guys who can shoot it. I think those are the two keys from both sides, slowing down Trae Young and the Hawks not letting the Bucks beat them on the perimeter. I'm also anxious to see who guards Antetokounmpo between his athletic ability and size. I don't know who on that Hawks team can guard him and guard him effectively. They don't have a ton of athletes with size.
Yeah, I was honestly going to say, you told us who's going to guard Young. I don't know who's going to guard Giannis is the thing. I don't know if Capella is quick enough to guard him, but
I thought of Collins, maybe Collins.
He had trouble guarding Embiid on one leg.
Yeah. Yeah.
Collins, that's probably who they go with. Yeah. But John Collins can get in foul trouble real fast because he's really aggressive. He is really aggressive. In the Sixers series in terms of contact.
So I wonder if maybe they're just going to be under the impression we'll let Giannis do what he wants, but we're not going to let the rest of the team beat us. I guess we'll have to see how they go about it. But Joe, if you want to let us know your thoughts on the series between Atlanta and Milwaukee.
So 2 matchups I have is Young versus Holiday, because that's going to be intriguing to see both point guards. They can play at a high level. Be interested to see what Holiday, like Mike was saying earlier about the Sixers and how Young played against them and leaned in for fouls and stuff. You just wonder how a veteran guard like Holiday is going to be able to, because he's been in the league longer than really anybody on the Sixers, maybe except for Curry, and Curry never guarded Young. So it'll be interesting to see how Holiday does there. Lopez and Capella, I think, would be interesting. And the reason I said that is watching a lot of the Sixers-Hawks series, Trae Young would go down the middle of the lane and lob up the alley-oop pass to Capella, and it worked many times. It worked a lot. And, if that's the case against Milwaukee, they need to shut that down. So will Lopez be able to get in front of Capella, knock Capella to the ground a couple of times, like get physical with them, do something like that? Because I'll tell you, that's a big move in a big play, and Young was even trying to score those times. Sometimes he did the floater. I got Brook Lopez as an X factor. I think he could have a big series. It could take Capella out of his game. He's a veteran guy, and a guy, like Mike said, could shoot the ball well. So I look for Lopez to have a big series. And I'll tell you right now, we could see the coming out party of Kevin Huerter, because that guy played.
We saw it already.
Yeah, well, he had a big game last night. What is he, 27 points? I mean, unbelievable. So, you got to watch him, old school player, gets to the basket well, shoots the ball well, and just seems to be that he had the will to win last night, because that's what they were saying, at least on the broadcast. I'll take that from one of the announcers. They kept saying he had the will to win. So anyway, that's what I got there. And Derek, do you want me to give you my prediction?
Hold on. Yeah, no, hold on to that for a second.
Okay.
So I will say, of course, you didn't see him for the last couple games. DeAndre Hunter is officially out for Atlanta Hawks. He went out with knee surgery. He was a very good wing defender for them. But
is Reddish out?
Who's that?
Reddish is he out?
Yeah, he was going to the middle
he's
of the
been
season.
out? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I may be in the minority, but I truly think that Trae Young is going to struggle in this series, because if I figure a team that can guard his game a little bit, I feel like it's the Bucks. You have Holiday is a good obviously we talked about his defensive first team. A good perimeter defender, and he's taller than what Young is going to be. And if Young gets by him ultimately, which is going to happen, in the middle there you have Antetokounmpo, and by the way, Brook Lopez is one of the best shot blockers in the NBA. So I'm not sure that those lobs and those floaters are going to do as well against Giannis and Lopez. In the one game, now they played 3, but for some reason Trae Young only played 1 game against Milwaukee. He only had 15 in that game, so he didn't completely dominate. But the key for the Hawks seems to be Bogdanovich, who averaged in 2 games, he scored 30 points per game. So and they're kind of sort of this similar players, him and Herter. So, but I would definitely think that those guys are going to be the types that score the most in these series. They did have.
It's going to depend on Bogdanovich's knee.
Yeah, if healthy, of course, yes.
Gallinari.
He was struggling.
Gallinari, yes.
Gallinari,
as well.
Yeah, he's another
coming
one.
off the bench.
Role guy. Yeah.
Now for the Bucks, I'm not sure of this stat. I didn't get to research it, but from what I saw, it said that Giannis was the first player in a Game 7 victory to score 40 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists. So he's officially, I don't think anyone's going to be able to guard him. We talked about it. That's the thing. But Holiday is struggling right now offensively. In the playoffs, he only has a 39% field goal percentage and 26 from 3. So he needs to get out of that funk a little bit, because he averaged 19, 4.7, and 7.7 against the Hawks in the 3 games this season. So I definitely think that he is a key. But look for guys like Brian, and as Mike mentioned, they are a little weak, the Hawks are, in terms of their perimeter 3 defense. So look for guys like Brian Forbes. The thing is, they're not giving a lot of time to a lot of their bench guys, so it's hard to really grab some guys off the bench to look for. But look for the 3-point shots, Chris Middleton as well. But ultimately, I don't know if it was blatantly obvious as it was in the first one with who everyone's taking. I'll go first this time. I'm going with the Bucks. Give me the Bucks in 6. I'm saying, and the Bucks and Suns in the finals for me. Joe?
I actually just wrote it down. I said Bucks in 6 too. I have the Bucks in 6, and my original picks, the Bucks and Suns.
Okay.
Well, there's not going to be much parity here, guys, because I have the Bucks in 6 as well.
Okay.
I do think I almost said 5 just to be a little different. I think that's super hasty, though. I think the Hawks are good enough to fight. I just think Derek, it's funny that you mentioned Drew Holiday. And I actually wrote down typed up here before we started that I think this is the perfect team for him to break out against. Because of their inability to defend on the perimeter. I mean, none of those guys are athletic enough, including Young defensively, because he's not big enough to guard him on the perimeter. I think he's going to have a huge series. I think he's going to be the X factor in this series, not just defensively on Young, but I think he's going to be the third party on the offensive side with Giannis and Middleton to take this series.
So we have our picks. Everyone is going with now watch it be the Hawks and the Clippers, but even though every one of us went the opposite, but so those are our picks. Let us know in the comments. Let us know your picks, who's going to make the finals, and let us know who you think is going to win between the 4 teams that remain. Really quick here, we're a little short on time, so we do have one more segment really quick. We're going to run through to each of us. There are currently 7 teams who have open head coaching vacancies in the NBA. Let me read out those 7 teams real quick in alphabetical order, just so no one thinks that I'm putting the Boston Celtics first, because I'm a Boston Celtics fan. Boston Celtics are number 1, Dallas Mavericks, Indiana Pacers, New Orleans Pelicans, Orlando Magic, Portland Trailblazers, and the Washington Wizards are the 7 teams who have currently, as far as of Monday, June 21st, these are the 7 teams. Could change tonight for all we know. But we're going to let you guys know where are some good places, what's the best place, where are some good places to go, and where are the bad places. I don't think we really ranked them, but let's start off with you, Joe. Just run through, if you want to say 1 or 2 things about each team. You don't have to get too flashy, but let us know your thoughts on the 7 head coaching vacancies.
All right, so I have the Orlando Magic at 7, and I just don't think it's a great destination. And I just figured that they don't have that great of a team right now, so it's just not a sexy place to go. Number 6, the Boston Celtics. Sorry, Derek, but I don't think, except for Jason Tatum, Marcus, I mean, they have a couple of guys there, but I don't know. I feel like Boston,
Dear God.
I don't know. I got them at 6. Number 5 is the Washington Wizards. I know they have Beal and Westbrook, but I didn't think they made my top 4, so I have them at 5.
Joe, you'd rather
4,
Beal and Westbrook and what's left around that team than Tatum and Jaylen Brown and what's left on that team?
Derek, I always say I'm not very good in the NBA, so this is part of my problem. I'm not very good when it comes to the NBA. All right, number 4, I have the New Orleans Pelicans, which I probably should have them lower now looking at this, actually, because I think Zion's attractive, though, and, you know, I think they're a good team. Number 3, I got the Indiana Pacers, because I know they've been playing good ball. Malcolm Brogdon's a good player. They have a couple good scorers. I have them at 3. Number 2, I have the Dallas Mavericks, because I think Doncic by himself could get a coach there. Might as well just recruit somebody that's foreign. Maybe he'll come like Doncic. I don't know. Number 1 is the Portland Trailblazers, because, well, if they can hang on to Lillard, I guess, you know, that would be a good place. But if they can't, then I guess they could be like in the top 6 or 7. I don't know. I tried. So I'm gonna say I tried.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, I don't agree with a lot of what he said.
No, I don't either, for the record, but we'll take turns.
I'll tell you this: I agreed with Orlando for the most part. I don't really love their situation down that way. I would love the Boston job.
Oh, there it is.
You know, I don't. Maybe rephrase it. I don't know that I would love it, but I think it's still a premier destination when you have 2 really young, talented players in Jason Tatum, who should be a Sixer, and Jaylen Brown.
Marcus Smart.
He's also very talented. They just brought back Al Horford. That'll be a decent veteran, but they're paying him what they made fun of the Sixers for offering to pay him. So that's kind of ironic when it comes down to it. Indiana to me is interesting only because I don't think they're going to hold on to Brogdon. So that's not a place that I would love. I think one of he or Sabonis might be on their way out, and those are their two most attractive pieces. So that's not a place that I love a whole lot. I will say I do like the Pelicans. I think that could be a fun place to go and coach. There are some really talented young players on that roster with Ingram and Williamson. I absolutely love Brandon Ingram. There's part of me that looks back and says, man, what would it be like to have somebody who could run the point and shoot the ball from that draft? That would be cool. Lonzo Ball played some good basketball this season as well. So I think there's some pieces there to build around. The Trailblazers, obviously, they're looking to get rid of like a top guy. They're talking about Lillard or McCollum not even being there. But when you look at this list of teams and you think about a place where there's a guy to build around, right? Like a main piece to build around to take a team and take them to the next level. There are two teams that stand out to me. And that's the Mavericks and the Celtics. You got Luka in one place and you got Tatum, Brown in the other place. The rest of them either have aging veterans at their core, like the Wizards and the Trailblazers, or have very little to speak of, like the Magic or the Pacers. And like I said, I think the Pelicans are at least intriguing to a coach to go and grow with the likes of Ingram and Williamson. I don't know, Derek. Are we a little closer?
We're a little closer, yeah. I do have one outlier here, which I'll dive into, but and we can talk. We have a few minutes. We can talk about it afterwards if we want to. But on the bottom of the list is the Washington Wizards for me. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a max extension at a Beal, but that's best case scenario. Worst case, he's gone, and you're left with Russell Westbrook, who doesn't have any desire to win any games anymore. He just wants to pile up the stats. Best case scenario, you have Westbrook and Beal, and they take up all the money, and the rest of the supporting cast is just not very good. So that is not a place. And supposedly ownership is not very good in Washington. So that's a lot. Thinking as a basketball coach here, that is not where I want to go. Number 6. I actually have the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the best win now option, I think, of all these. But
even if Lillard stays or goes,
they have the number 29 ranked defense, and the thing is, I guarantee if Lillard and McCollum stay, they're going to bring in one piece maybe, and it's not going to be enough. So I think it's almost as if this coach is going to be set up to fail because they're not close to the top teams in the West. I think they're too far away, but they're good enough to give them a chance. So I feel like if they don't win in the next 2 to 3 years, then Lillard is gone. Then they're going to start over. Then they're probably going to get rid of me as a head coach. So I don't want to really be a part of that because I don't think that they're set up. They're set up to win now, but I don't think they're set up to win. So not a place for me. Number 5, I have the Orlando Magic a little higher. Okay. I understand. Yeah, there's not much there. Fultz has played a little bit better there. Jonathan Isaac is a good piece. Both coming off ACL surgery, though. By the way, Cole Anthony was a good point guard piece for them. But my thinking is,
they don't have star power though.
If I'm brought in, I'm there long term because they're part of a rebuild. So I know I have job security being there. Also, they have 6 potential first-round picks over the next 4 drafts.
I was just going to say
that's a lot. That's a lot.
So, yes.
Great minds think alike, as Mr. H would say.
So I have that number 5. Number 4 is the Indiana Pacers. I thought it was fitting to put them right in the middle because they are very bleh and very standard all around. They were 14th offensively, right in the middle of the league, 14th defensively, right in the middle of the league. Sabonis, Brogdon may be gone, as you mentioned. Turner's been talked about. Miles Turner been talked about being traded. But they have LeVert. So they have a decent foundation, but they're still probably 2 to 3 pieces away from being uh second tier in the East. I would say not even to the length of what the top tier teams are. So number 3, I have the New Orleans Pelicans. You have if you get a super max from Zion, which they probably will, you have them for 6 more years. You have Ingram through 2025. They have 4 draft picks uh, in the second round of 2021, as well as their first round pick. They have 5 picks in 2022. They have 2 first round picks in 2023. So they have a lot to build up. So I would be excited to be a Pelicans coach. You mentioned Ball. You mentioned all the players there. Number 2, I have the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic, of course, superstar potential. They have 25 million in cap space, so they can bring in really as many as they want. Let's not forget, everyone bashed Kristaps Porzingis, but by the way, he's only 25 years old, so he can still be a part of this team. I looked at more, maybe like they bring in a Kyle Lowry. I thought of maybe a DeMar DeRozan could come over and play for them.
Veteran guy.
From San Antonio, some veteran presences in there.
No picks this year, though.
Yeah.
That's bad.
So it's got to come from outside. And okay, call me a homer, but yeah, I went with Boston Celtics first. But Joe, I'm offended that you had them so low.
6.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Boston has been in the top of the league for so long. Yeah, Jason Tatum is 23. Jaylen Brown is 24. They both had their points per game highest average in 26 and 24 points a game this year. Not the best single talent, obviously that's Doncic, but 2 of the best wing combos that it is maybe even in NBA right now. And you've really found that if you don't have wing players and wing shooters,
hard to win.
It's hard to win. But they're a win now. Yep, look at those guys back there. They're a win now team, couple away, but they're also a long-term team. So
they're young.
I'm going to be growing up with that team, and I'm sure I would have a long rope. So that's why I have the Celtics.
All right, that makes sense. I went too low on them. Sorry.
Offense taken, Joe, but we can move on. And that'll ultimately do it, though, for us. We talked a little second round recap, a little conference finals, and the head coach vacancies in the NBA. Mike, building you up here. Now we got you as an NBA contributor, so we appreciate you coming on. You've tackled all the sports.
NBA.
Bring you on for some NHL, maybe for the finals, Stanley Cup Finals. We'll bring you on.
You call me when you're ready for some MLS action.
All right, we appreciate it.
I love it.
Thanks, guys.
Joe, final thoughts from you, sir.
Oh boy, this was a heck of a show. We didn't reach the limit of the Leonard Thibodeau show. We didn't reach that limit. No. We're under there. No, this is fun. The playoffs have been pretty interesting to watch, I have to say, and it's fun that the fans are there. I want to remember that because we didn't get that last year, and the bubble was something of a very unique circumstance. And thanks to COVID, we had to watch through it, but they did play. I was happy about that. And no, this year, just the dynamics of a home crowd have to be just so, it's such a big thing. And I think that's been really cool to see. And we have 4 pretty good teams. So, and all these teams haven't won it. All these 2 of them haven't won a championship in a long time, as you told us earlier, Derek.
So,
oh Lord.
Anyway, everyone, we appreciate you watching. Jump down to the comments. Let us know, who do you think is making the finals between the Suns, Clippers, Hawks, and Bucks, and let us know who you think is going to win the NBA Finals. Jump down in the comments and let us know. While you're here, we appreciate you watching. click that subscribe button and like the video. Let us know you appreciate us and what you're watching. And it helps us build the channel. So we really want to build up this channel to new heights. So we appreciate you watching the videos. Don't forget, if you want to listen, we're available on all podcast platforms, Facebook group, Twitter, and email us timeoutwithderekandjoe@gmail.com. As always, everyone, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Stay safe and take care.